Thanks everyone for joining our webcast series on best practices in digital risk management. Today's event is focused on emerging threats, persistent vulnerabilities, and strategies for protecting your enterprise. With the continued growth of ransomware attacks, business email compromise, and emerging threat vectors, we're fortunate to have with us today two experts that will provide you with insights into the threats, as well as strategies to help secure your enterprises. Before I introduce today's speakers, we've got a few housekeeping rules to cover. Your phones will be muted for the duration of the webcast in order to prevent background noise from interfering with today's presentations. To submit a question for our presenters, please type it into the Q&A panel found on the Event Center console. We will answer all questions at the end of both presentations. If you have any issues with audio or video, please message the host privately or email info@digitalshadows.com and we'll promptly address the issue. Our first presenter is Rick Holland, Vice President of Strategy for Digital Shadows. Rick has more than 14 years' experience working in information security. Prior to joining Digital Shadows, he was the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, providing strategic guidance on security architecture, operations, and data privacy. Rick also served as an intelligence analyst in the U.S. Army. He is currently the co-chair of the SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence Summit and holds a BS in Business Administration with an MIS concentration from the University of Texas at Dallas. Joining Rick is Adam Karcher. Adam is an FBI special agent in the Philadelphia Cyber Squad. He is a former unit chief in the FBI Cyber Division and as the NCIJTF Deputy Director heading the Office of Data Exploitation. His responsibilities centered on the development of advanced technical analysis and threat visualization capabilities utilized to translate adversary activity in the domestic cyber infrastructure into investigative and operational opportunity. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Rick Holland. Rick.
All right. Can you guys hear me all right? Well, what I thought I would start off with is actually building on something that Adam's going to talk about, is understanding your data and your susceptibility to being targeted. And I want to kind of go back, maybe to the Wayback Machine for some organizations, but I'm kind of curious, in your orgs, have you ever heard this statement been made? Maybe you've made that statement yourself. Meanwhile, you actually have these services running in your environment. Box, Amazon Web Services. We have a history of not getting visibility into things. And it actually goes back, I remember being an administrator working on ESX boxes early on in VMware's days, and people would say, oh, it's just a box in the corner. And then suddenly they got visibility, sometimes years later, understand the risk there. That happened also with mobile devices when they first came out. And we've seen the same thing happen with cloud over the past 5 years or so. And it really comes down to this kind of key component of getting visibility into risks. And that's what I wanted to focus on for my part of the presentation. And I'll kind of start off with how Digital Shadows helps out with that. And then I'm going to transition into some actual guidance on what to look for if you're going to do this yourself, and then some use cases that we help our customers with. But essentially what Digital Shadows does is we look across the open, deep, and dark web for risks to your business. To your brand, to your reputation, to your employees, to your consumers. And we do it across these areas at the bottom. And I won't read through them because I'm going to actually walk through them in more detail. But essentially, we're looking beyond your firewall, looking for bad things that are happening about your people, about your brand, about your people. That you can think about yourself, but when you're looking at your digital footprint, looking to see what's leaking out of your environment, there's a number of things that you want to look at. You want to look at your brand names. You want to look at your subsidiaries. You want to look at the key members of your staff, mobile applications, key business partners that you have. I won't read through all of these, but essentially what you're doing here is you're building out a collection plan. When I was at Forrester covering threat intelligence, one of the things that I was patronized by, annoyed by, was getting threat intelligence and not knowing if it's relevant to you. And threat intelligence all starts with a collection plan. And so that's what you're thinking about here, in that your assets is, here's the things that we're going to build a collection on. What are the things that we can target based on these things in the column on the left? And then on the right-hand side, you have areas that you're going to go and collect on. And I mentioned the World Wide Web, the open web, dark web, deep web, IRC, FTP, mobile application stores, social media sites, code sites, pastebin types of sites that are out there. And ultimately, you're taking your collection plan, matching against those targets, and then ultimately you're going to find these risks that I'm going to dig into in a little bit more detail. What I want to talk about is how Digital Shadows does this approach, and it's really a balance between two things. One is technology, and the other is people. So essentially, we build out this collection plan that's unique to you, your vertical, and your threat model, and then we go look for it. And we'll find a raw number of mentions that are out there. We have found your brand, let's say Digital Shadows in this example, mentioned this many times out there. And then essentially through a process of rules-based processing, analytics, machine learning for specific use cases, we're presenting things and moving them down this funnel. Some of these things get looked at by an analyst. Context is added, validated, and sent on to one of our customers in the form of an incident, which would be an alert, something along those lines. Others, sometimes we just go straight to the customer based on things that we find and confidence that we have around them. But you'll notice if you look on the right, for those that come from the intelligence world, that this is very similar to the intelligence cycle. Planning and collection, we're going out and collecting, we're doing processing, we're doing analysis, both automated analysis and human analysis, ultimately disseminating, getting feedback, and then rinsing and repeating the process. Let's see if I can click right. What I thought I would do is walk through some examples of the types of things that we're looking for when trying to understand digital risks beyond your perimeter. And the first is cyber threats. And so this is kind of the traditional threat intelligence business that we have, understanding threat actors that are targeting you, be it a hacktivist that's talking about targeting you publicly. In this particular case, and this is kind of an interesting example for me to use as well, in this case, we have a threat actor who is talking about vulnerabilities that they have found on a person's transport company, in this case, in their environment, in their Windows CE devices. Here, it's AlphaBay, which is a little bit ironic because AlphaBay no longer exists. A lot of conjecture as to what has caused this. Most recently, Wall Street Journal has said a law enforcement interdiction has taken AlphaBay market down, but it's been down just over a week. But here we're going out and looking about how adversaries are talking about your brand, your organization, and then feeding that information back to our customers. At your data. And I guess one thing that's important to mention is, we're monitoring and we're managing and mitigating, so it's not just enough that we're going to alert. We actually have a takedown service where if we find data out on a particular site, we can actually go through this full-on takedown service, multiple languages support, and have that content removed. Now, in the case of the previous example with AlphaBay, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get content removed from those sorts of sites, but there's plenty of providers that you can get content taken down. With the data, we're looking at things, could be structured data, personal health information, personally identifiable information, could be BIN numbers if you're into credit card, payment card fraud, could be unstructured data that we're looking for, code names, plan names, and things like this. This has got particular interest lately because we're now less than a year out before GDPR is in full effect. And wouldn't it be nice to kind of know what your footprint looks like before that goes into place and have an idea of what risks you might have. Next up, I want to talk about your brand's exposure. So this is one example of many that we're doing. In this particular case, it's oftentimes of interest of our e-commerce and retailers, is looking at counterfeit coupons. Now, I don't have an example from a specific customer, but this is an example from a conviction in 2016, last year, of someone that was creating these coupons, selling them on the dark web, Silk Road in this example. People were able to buy them and then commit fraud against organizations. Other things that we help our customers out here is people setting up typo squat domains, trying to phish your staff, your consumers, fake social media sites, things along those lines. IPs, very important people in your organization. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be your C-suite. This could be a domain administrator that might be targeted, something along those lines. The example I wanted to use here is actually an FBI data chart, and I thought it would be good just because Adam's on the line with us, and he's back now. So when I wrap up, we'll switch back to Adam. But here, this is a FBI graphic that they use on business email compromise. So one of the things that I often talk to clients and prospects about here is how likely is your executives to be socially engineered with a Beck attempt. So perhaps there's a VIP that's talking about their traveling, going to conferences, things along those lines, and then someone uses a pretext of that person traveling to come back to the CFO and say, hey, I'm on the road at this conference. Please go ahead and authorize this wire transfer. And then it's a billion-dollar industry that's out there. So just getting an understanding of what the digital footprint looks like for your high-value targets, geotagging, their travel plans, are they linking information, even information about their family that might be of concern, is something that we should think about. This is an interesting one, and I pulled an example with Verizon as one of the later pieces, but being able to track your key business partners, and when something goes into the public domain that they have been compromised, being able to get an alert about that. Also, if you're tracking dark web marketplaces or forums, being able to see chatter, if you will, or people selling exploits against key technologies that you have in your stack. So maybe if you're a retailer, this is a point-of-sales system. Maybe if you're a banking company, this is a Swift gateway. But having an understanding of how the adversaries are targeting those can be helpful for you. Now here, I have a screenshot just of a floor plan that we captured. So it could be sensitive data that someone could use for social engineering in your organization, something along those lines. One of the more common examples that I couldn't show you an example of is here is physical threats against one of our customers. So we might track someone's location of an office space and try to understand what's happening in that area. Is there some sort of threat? Maybe it's protests, something along those lines that you need to be aware of. Other cases, it might be you have an annual event that generates 60% of your revenue, and you want to get a feel for what threats could be coming that could cause a problem for that, and being able to track those. And then of these digital risks that we're helping our customers understand is looking at your infrastructure. So we're doing passive infrastructure assessment of your digital footprint, looking for new services that come online. We're looking to see if those, which could be particularly helpful. Of course, I have WannaCry and we have Petya as examples, and I know Adam's going to talk a little bit about ransomware in some of his slides. But what are the vulnerabilities that you have? Do you have a new service that's vulnerable to SMB1? It's running that service that needs to be patched. So just having a backstop to your existing controls, because it can be quite difficult to manage a vulnerability management program, particularly for large organizations that have grown through M&A. A couple things, of course, this isn't the order that we're going to go because we're going to pass it back to Adam, but a couple components here. If you're interested in understanding what your digital footprint looks like across these 7 areas that I've talked about, let us know. We can give you a free tailored look at that. We also have an intelligence summary that we send out on threats with analysis from our intelligence team, and you can subscribe to that for free as well. And then finally, for those of you going to summer camp, a week after next in Black Hat, we can arrange time to talk with you individually. We have an event on Wednesday night at Fleur. And then we also have, I kind of like this theme as kind of a geek, a summer camp theme. So we have these cool T-shirts here, giving away a Yeti cooler. And then we're also going to have s'mores in our booth as well. So with that, let me go ahead and pass it back to Jeff so he can pass it back to Adam and let him kick off his content.
Thank you for that presentation, Rick. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Adam Karcher. Adam?
My name is Agent out of the Philadelphia division. I most recently transferred. I spent a good 9 years at Cyber Division headquarters down in D.C., working out of the Hoover Building and in our various offsites. I spent the bulk of those 9 years working at the NCI-JTF, the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, primarily on national security threats, but I've been a cyber agent for almost 14 years, so I've been exposed to quite a lot of the entire spectrum of cyber issues that are affecting sort of the global infrastructure. So my presentation today is going to kind of go through, in general, what our optic is from the FBI and the U.S. government, both as an opportunity for commerce and free exchange of information, all the way through to the the use of information technology to affect terrorist threats and nation-state sort of priorities. Let's see. Slide is our then director, Comey, at a security summit conference a couple of years ago. Mainly, I mean, it's just I have shared this philosophy for a while, but I haven't seen it put so succinctly, except for this example, where we are, recognizing that sort of already shrunken the world. It's taken what used to be a 2-week journey over a steamship or taps on a telegraph wire. It's transformed that into instant remote access and rich communications. And so we, as an organization, and law enforcement in general, and governments even more generally, have to understand how we can cooperate to police is the wrong word, but cooperate to help mitigate those that would do damage to commerce and communication for various purposes, which I'll get into a bit later. And also, that's sort of a second key point is that the private sector sees all threats. Hacking the FBI and other, DOD and entities like that they're getting at us because we are a large profile target. They want to understand what we're attempting to do, and they want to affect our ability to do it. The private sector sees everything. It sees ransomware attacks. It sees theft of intellectual property, extortion. It sees all sorts of things, corporate espionage, government espionage. So us engaging better with the private sector has been a goal for quite a long time. Overview of FBI cyber in general, to include our global footprint, some challenges that we see working with cyber as a medium, as a domain, and again the importance of the partnerships, working with both private sector and other government organizations, and both inside the U.S. and globally. Some emerging trends, and then obviously time for questions about what I speak about. The program actually spans the entire organization. Technology has taken business from files and paper through full digital electronic commerce. Information systems spread across the entire organization, obviously. So from our perspective, we are both operating a traditional technical support and information sort of net defense, defending our perimeter, defending our information systems, providing technology for us to do our jobs. And so those are the aspects of the organization that are engaged in high technology crimes, either for the pursuits of counterterrorism, counterintelligence, criminal sort of enterprises, and the like. Shows the roles and responsibilities broadly that the U.S. government has which organization, which covers, and it covers which domain. Now, you would probably not guess this, but this slide took, I think, over a year to negotiate between the member organizations. Everybody had to craft the words incredibly specifically. But you can see, so DHS manages the protection, prevention, mitigation, recovery. That's more on the wire type stuff. They're obviously issuing bulletins, maintaining infrastructure, and assisting, governments and organizations and companies that are the victims of these large-scale attacks in getting their infrastructure and things back online. The FBI does a protection mission, obviously, and prevention mission, but we do it from a different aspect. We're playing this long game when it comes to protection. So while we won't come in, assist in network recovery, we'll endeavor, and everything we do, we're endeavoring to understand the adversary, understand the threat, so we can mitigate it long term. Now that might that opportunity might allow us to work specifically on networks that have been compromised in concert with those organizations that own them to help us affect that long-term goal. But and if you're looking for cleanup and guidance in those areas, the FBI just does not do that. And obviously, the DoD/NSA is again more of a long game, but they operate almost exclusively in foreign space. Die Hard with a Vengeance or Live Free or Die Hard. I'm not sure, but that's not what the FBI Cyber Division looks like, although it is nice. But again, cyber as a priority, we rank, obviously, the prevention of terrorist attacks and the use of information technology to affect those attacks, whether it's in, attacks against critical infrastructure. That's obviously our top priority. Next in the stack is preventing and mitigating intelligence operations against the government and corporate entities. And finally, we are understand and prevent cyber attacks, so sort of criminal attacks against and other high technology crimes against those same organizations. Now, we have a unique perspective. We are the only agency with the authority to investigate the entire spectrum of, and including the active war, which I'll get to in a later slide. We will definitely and have definitely assisted those organizations in the U.S. government that are sort of detailed with protecting the U.S. In those situations. So again, we get to see and participate in the full spectrum of activity. Again, I'll sort of get over our kind of our global footprint. Now, again, as the previous slide stated, we are obviously a domestic agency, but we have a global footprint. So we have roughly 64, it's always in flux, 64 offices where we maintain legal attachés. So those are FBI personnel that are stationed in embassies globally. And in some of those embassies, we have dedicated cyber personnel that are there either on a permanent basis, so they'll go for a 1 or 2 year term, or we can surge and have surged cyber experienced and cyber savvy agents to LEGATs on a more temporary basis. We are constantly doing assessments on which countries, both as a potential target with some of our partners, and those countries which have a significant threat, whether it's the typical Nigerian scams or terrorist intentions. We will surge FBI cyber experienced agents to those regions to help us again collect and mitigate and understand the threat. We have 8 permanent, as mentioned. Some of these are temporary. We are again always surging and moving personnel. The FBI is a very mobile organization, so we can surge as required to address emerging and evolving threats. But recognizing that just a few years ago we didn't have any cyber ALATs. Cyber, as was rapidly accelerating, and we recognized the need to have our cyber footprint outside of the U.S. again, for the interest of both, again, assisting our partners, assisting sort of the global understanding of threats and helping to mitigate those. Again, anything that affects Europe will likely also affect the United States. We are, again, playing this long game to assist us in our endeavors to mitigate the threats and prevent them from executing their attacks. So some of that we've seen, again, working with our global footprint, is legislation. So we, again, are a domestic agency, and we follow, obviously, the Constitution. There's a further narrowing of our aperture that's provided by guidance and policy from DOJ, and there's a further narrowing of our aperture in order to, with internal FBI policy. So it's always, at a minimum, going to be, obviously following the laws of the land. but with additional protections in place for the protection of privacy and those things along those lines. But again, when you are working a global problem that is information technology and cyber, one country may have vastly different laws than we do. So trying to get those to sync up, whether it's what certain countries might consider your email address to be, your IP address to be private, while it's something you're broadcasting in almost every email you send. Other countries do not. So again, trying to work through those challenges has always been, and will probably foreseeable future, a difficult hurdle. Again, we operate on different time scales. Again, we have a lot of resources. The FBI is, tens of thousands of personnel strong. Some organizations that I've dealt with personally, especially at the NCIJTF, may only have a handful of personnel working the same problem. And so enabling those partners, or expecting those partners to be able to respond to an incident with the same time scales that we do can often be a challenge. Again, also technological limitations. The threat is always evolving, and we have to expend a lot of energy and a lot of brain power to stay ahead of that evolution. And again, as I mentioned, the fourth bullet's kind of the same as the first, where there's different statutes and abilities to share and who can share what and how those protections need to be maintained. Again, always makes it a challenge. Same thing, again, law is an issue and sort of policies are an issue globally. Some countries mandate a much longer data retention time. Others have no such mandates. They've got no guidelines or policies whatsoever. And so we may be running into an issue that after a week or two is now gone because the information was not stored, saved, or shared. Getting a lot of this information back and forth to international partners, again, it's a technological and legal limitation for us. We're sometimes talking about terabytes or petabytes of information that we have got to get securely, maintaining chains of custody, maintaining the lines of evidence because a lot of, on the criminal side especially, our work is intended to affect a prosecution. And any hint of evidence mishandling or any potential question that a defense could, present regarding the handling of evidence, especially going across, country or national lines, is something we need to avoid. So everything has to be done. All I's have to be dotted, all T's have to be crossed. And again, cyber as an issue, or as a sort of a domain for the FBI, is only about 11 or 12 years old. Prior to that, there really wasn't a cyber division. It was high technology crimes. But now we are under a constant pressure to hire, maintain, train, and deploy sophisticated cyber agents across the organization. And every other country, every other law enforcement or government agency dealing in this problem set has run into the same problems. There's just not enough people to do the work. Using 10-year-old computer systems on your corporate network or on your government network generally doesn't allow you to do the best work. Again, we spend a lot of FBI and other government organizations in the U.S. spend a lot of time, money, and energy to keep the network and your ability to do your job at its peak. So again, recent slide, we're looking at internet population as compared to global population, and it is significant, especially in terms of growth. We're looking at triple and quadruple digit growth in the use and penetration of internet usage, whether that's mobile or computer or whatever. It is something that it's just exposing more and more potential victims to a problem. And again, obviously, we don't see this necessarily declining, especially the sort of the advent and the birth of the Internet of Things concept, where even your home may call you and let you know that it's still on. that type of technology and that type of connectivity is just going to make things even more complex and worse as we go along. So on sort of what we see as sort of a kill chain / anatomy of a hack. We see this whole path, this kill chain sort of escalation of intrusions and cyber attacks to be once confined to the domain of the national security. We're now seeing this sort of philosophy permeate even more and more threats. It used to be simple scanning for vulnerabilities, popping something that some criminal hacker finds, doing what they need to get done, and leaving. Now we're seeing the convergence, and that's a theme that I'll probably touch on a few times, the convergence of traditional espionage techniques used as a means to an end, utilizing cyber as a factor that allows you to have much greater impact across a wider set of targets. Bottom part of the slide again, that's that full spectrum that the FBI participates in. We have to have our resources dedicated to each one of these. All the way on the right, warfare. Generally, we stay out of that, but again, we can and do work very closely with our DoD partners to understand how the threats we are working on the other end of the spectrum, how that might affect or effectuate attacks that would be considered acts of war. And the convergence factor is gotten, and it's something, again, I've been working national security threats for about a third that I've been in the FBI. And I would the shift from these one-off hacktivists, small-time, low technology, low sophistication threats to now this entire sort of technological and cyber capability has evolved a lot faster than I was expecting. So you've got these commonalities, and there's entire industries of individuals with the technological savvy and with the motivation, generally money, to provide these services. So an organization, a criminal organization, Crime Group A and Crime Group B, can be pretty small. They have a target. They have an idea of how they want to hit it. They work with their members to kind of come up with a plan of attack, but then they offload all of the crazy technical work to an entire ecosystem of individuals who are just providing their technological know-how for a means to an end. That center stack just wants money. The one Crime Group A and B also want money, but they also don't want to have to keep an entire docket of these people on their payroll, so they can really offload a lot of the work to that center stack. Now, that the existence of that center stack makes it difficult for us because while you may have someone who is an IT admin working a legitimate job, doing great work, that's great. That's not criminal. But that side job, that part of their life that they whether wittingly or unwittingly, spend creating capability and creating tool sets for criminal organizations to use, that's where it becomes difficult because they can be essentially hiding in plain sight. So it's not like you've got, with many of the national security threats, there's a dedicated unit and a dedicated military service and a country that is dedicated to getting an advantage over the United States. That's one self-contained unit, and there's no question. When you get into the creation of technology that can be used for both legitimate and illegitimate purposes, that's where it becomes increasingly difficult. Again, as I mentioned before, we're facing global threats, and so we need to address them with that sort of mentality. It used to be that crime, bank robbery was done with a Model T and a Tommy gun, and if they were lucky, hell, that was kind of the creation of the FBI. transportation, the ability to move from one place to the other physically dictated the need for an organization that could manage crime across state lines, hence the FBI. Now, crime can be, you no longer have to be physically present to steal $20 million out of a bank. You can be anywhere in the world. It could be distributed across thousands of systems across the entire, globe, all skimming or scamming a few dollars here and there from these various systems, all getting funneled back to one criminal organization. So we need to be able to work in the same way the threat works. And then a lot of times, so this is the government collaboration, and then I'll get into sort of the private sector collaboration in a bit. I worked at the NCIJTF essentially since its inception in 2009 through about 2015. I worked on the Office of Data Exploitation. And so again, as you would expect, these investigations generate a lot of data. And so we needed to have a way of sharing that and utilizing it to advance the purposes of our existence, which is to mitigate threats. So the task force was a way to share perspective, and across all government entities that have a dog in this fight. I know that sounds crazy, but it actually is, there is sharing and communication going on amongst organizations. Is the same thing. It is a public-private partnership, and it's an alliance between the FBI and members of the private sector. And we can pass as much information as we can to assist those member organizations protecting their networks. It's regular meetings, it's face-to-face. It's one of the best things out of InfraGard is, those member organizations that participate and engage those local field offices, at those InfraGard meetings, they now have a name or a face to a name. And so rather than cold calling the FBI complaint desk, they now, will have, potentially a contact information directly into the FBI cyber squad, because they utilize those opportunities to engage with us and when we go out and do these events. Snapshot of some of the partnerships, some of the organizations that do participate. Again, you're getting best practices from all of these organizations, all sort of compiled in one place where we can get them out to affect the protection and mitigation of threats against your networks. So these are the sort of the various types of attacks, more on the, criminal side, and some of them obviously are used for nation-state adversaries, whether it's obfuscation of espionage by sort of a masking DDoS against an organization, or obviously theft of PII is very theft of IP is obviously something that nation states, considering the United States as an innovator in many areas, it's a lot easier to steal 10 years of research than to expend efforts researching for 10 years. And obviously we've seen that over the years against some of the threats you would expect. Complaint Center IP3 is our gateway for private entities, whether it's corporations or individuals, to report their issues. So it's a place where we can, it sort of compiles the complaints we get in and then routes them to the best venue. Again, in 2015, $1 billion in losses reported, and a little under 290,000 complaints received by IC3. And then routed to the right organization, or the right field office in the FBI to affect that investigation. Loss, again, it's going to be business email compromise, about a little under $250 million loss. There's auction frauds, there's Nigerian 419 scams, there's advance fees, identity theft. Again, there's, you name it. If there's a way to make money, it's probably found a way to do it. Whether it's social engineering scams or it's business email compromise, stuff along those lines, straight intrusions to steal and route and cause data and cause money to be funneled various locations. It's there's someone working on a way to do it. But as you would expect, a lot. The evolution of the threat, evolution of techniques, anything that is sort of successful. So if some criminal organization is doing, creating a new ransomware variant that has met with great success, whether it's incorporating some of the shadow broker information that we've seen recently, or a new technique, it's going to breed interest and it's going to breed innovation, which then breeds more success. And so we're in a constant battle, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, of trying to stay one step ahead of that threat. And so it's going to be increasing every year. The sophistication is going to be increasing every year. Again, more groups, even as you get farther and farther down the sophistication spectrum, since now you can pretty much buy off the shelf all the tools you'll need to affect this, you're going to be seeing more and more of these variants coming online and being used against targets. Data breaches with PII, which obviously can be used for any number of further intrusions and further social engineering work. The numbers seem to have gone down. It's hard to quantify a lot of these events for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, it's massively bad press. So we often run into companies just not calling law enforcement. And we don't begrudge them that. We're interested in hearing that every organization could possibly have, because again, this could be a segue, or this could be that one piece of information that we might need to open a big case and affect a big arrest or a big prosecution or mitigate, that long game threat. But we're not the ones that are going to come clean your network up. And so a lot of times we get these attacks that come in, penetrate our organization. They just want to get it cleaned up, and cleaning up often, destroys evidence. And so obviously there's some concerns that we're going to come in, we're going to take your network over, we're going to, demand all these things. No, you're a victim. In fact, we have an entire group within the FBI that is dedicated to helping, assisting, and understanding the needs of the victim. And so the last thing the FBI, or pretty much any organization that you're going to work with, is going to want to come in and do is further victimize you as an organization. We're not going to demand. We're not going to come take things over. And again, we fully understand if you just want to fix the glitch that just occurred last week when Bob clicked on that suspicious email and affected your network. We get that. But we also want to work, and we want to push, and we want to be able to get as much evidence as we can, maybe piece together something much larger than any one organization might be aware of, to help us, again, in the long term, mitigate those threats. No to ransomware, it's obvious, that it's the new thing. Again, I haven't worked the criminal side for quite a bit, so I'm still getting kind of up to speed. But again, from my perspective, working, the big national security threats to the U.S., is an evolution underway. It incorporates some of the techniques and the very successful counterintelligence or intelligence gathering methodologies, as with that center stack from our previous slide of an entire ecosystem, helping criminal organizations perfect their techniques. Again, the primer to the stages of ransomware. It is either going to be coming in through a spearfish, or the more sophisticated ones are going to be self-propagating, utilizing, again, techniques and vulnerabilities that only existed in the nation-state realm to gain effect what they want. And a lot of times they want money. They want Bitcoin. They aren't out there to go quietly, propagate across the network, and make affect a long-term national security goal. They want to get in, they want to spread, they want to shut things down, and have you pay to get them turned back on. Sure, this is an example of an earlier one. I don't know exactly when, but I'm pretty sure this is not the FBI. You can get our logo anywhere. But again, you'd be surprised. Years ago, I used to hear I'd get scams in email indicating that the FBI director has indicated an interest in my internet browsing activity, and I should click this link to make sure I don't get fined. And as I said earlier, evolution. You'll see a commonality in some of these slide decks, or these slides in my deck, that we're seeing an exponential increase in the evolution and the all these technologies, as you know, from earlier, you know, the onesie twosies per year of ransomware, all the way through this. Again, success breeds interest, which breeds innovation, which breeds success. You're going to see a lot. This is not going to slow down the creation of new types of ransomware, utilizing new techniques, hard encryption, so we can't discover keys from poorly coded malware. It's going to get worse before it gets better. How do you protect yourself? Obviously, a lot of this is just network, network defense 101. On, beyond the technical patching and making sure that you've got the right, least privileged philosophies operating, is user training. Make your employees aware of the threats that email and social media pose to your organization. One thing that the government obviously has embraced is the concept of air gapping. Your organization, it should not be on the same network that you use to check Facebook. And every organization I've worked in the U.S. government has separate networks for these things. There is no cross-contamination. There is no connectivity between your Washington Post or the Fox News or CNN and the work you do internal to that organization. Again, you don't need to have me tell you exactly the types of things that you need to be doing. You want to keep them offline, because without them, especially if there is not a vulnerability in the coding that allows us to decrypt that particular ransomware, or in the case of I think NotPetya, you really can't decrypt it. It's not designed, and then that was more of an attack rather than an attempt to gain information. We're not going to be able to get your data back unless you've got it backed up. Only got a few more minutes left, so I'm going to be slamming through these things. Let's see. Do not panic again. All it does is it makes it more of a successful thing for the adversary. You don't know what's unauthorized if you don't know who's authorizing your network. Maintain logs. Go through and make sure that you can reconstruct an event or an issue that affected your network to understand how that adversary or that intruder got in and managed to go through your network. The other things, again, you have to consider how you're going to manage your data across jurisdictions. Us working cyber from an investigative side of the house, corporations run into the same issue, especially when they've got offices across the entire globe. You have to figure out a way to be able to, maintain and access and utilize that data that you've captured to help further protect your network. Motivation to get people to pay. It's not only is it data loss, it is also shaming, putting personal information out there for you to sort of motivate you to pay. Again, it's all about motivation, a lot of these adversaries. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen intruder knowledge has gone in the toilet because you don't need to be, programming your code in assembly anymore. You can have an idea, I want to scam this company, and you can go buy everything you need to do it. So you don't need to know anything about how to actually affect that attack. Make things more complex. You see there's a lot of exponential curves, a lot of curves in my presentation. It's just going to get better before it gets worse. And unfortunately, the IoT apps are not tested for security flaws. They're about convenience, not about security. And that is going to be an issue, especially when you can rope in 5 million devices into a massive DDoS to affect your attack against a corporation. Everything, when you think about it, because all these technology is by design utilizing communications, and so anything that communicates for the purposes of affecting its mission is vulnerable to attack. This is a funny slide about what potentially could be happening in 5 or 10 years with everything being online. And a little section here, if I can squeeze it in, if not, just let me know, is the photo of a submarine battle, which is how it is sometimes hard to explain the massive amount of national security issues that are going on constantly. It is something hard to get into the public consciousness because it is just so foreign to what people do day in and day out. There are entire groups within countries that want to do other countries harm, whether to affect their own agenda or to ensure that their technology and their way of life can withstand a global event. A couple of years ago, that high-profile indictment of these Chinese hackers who were participating in the theft of intellectual property. That's one of the few times when the government actually came out and said, hey, this is exactly what's happening. We want to be able to impose a cost on those organizations conducting these attacks, and this is one way that we can affect that by outing them. Some more details on that, 61398. After the last couple, there are, we choose to voluntarily share everything. This is just the types of accesses that Skype requires on your phone. And whether this is Skype, legitimate, sure, but who actually reads a EULA? You might be downloading some game that has these odd requests for access to your information, and you're just going to click right through and give them that access. Now, who is going this is more information to share. Who's going to be using that? In many nation states. Now, this is the amount of information that people put out there voluntarily exposes you to all sorts of activities that are meant to utilize who you know to affect a goal, an intelligence goal for an organization. How do you protect yourself? A lot of this is common knowledge, but mainly you just have to understand that even the things you trust coming into your network, you might not be able to trust, whether that's for business email compromise or that's social engineering or other thing. You have to take a second before you really think, is this the right thing to do? If somebody that I have seen through many investigations across my career, the adversary has the time and it has the, and any interest, especially with APT, has the time and has the mission to access and be successful against your corporation, whether it's for some technology you're developing or some information that you hold, whether it's a law firm. They will take as long as it takes to affect that attack. And that is it. Information to include my cell and my unclassified email. If there are any questions, if I've allowed time for questions, feel free.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Adam. That was a great presentation. So the first question that we had come in, Adam, I think is directed to you. How often are you calling businesses that have been attacked versus, hearing from the businesses themselves first?
Depends on which phase of my career we're discussing. So on the national security side, I'd say 9 times out of 10 a week. Occasionally you'd get as obviously the sophistication of the net defense shops in these private companies and the government organizations increases, they're getting better at detecting it. But for a long time, we were essentially getting on the phone with the highest levels, C-suite personnel we could find, and giving and having a hard conversation about what we detected. Now with the advent of this one of the smash and grab ransomware, it's obvious you're getting, other than the FBI knowing that there's this wave of attacks going on like everybody else does, you know that you're going to get hit by that. So when it comes to the obvious smash and grab, they're going to be calling on.
Great. What's your perspective on that? How often are you actually, in terms of your clients and notifying them of events?
Oh, we actually have a disclosure process that we use for even people that aren't our clients from our intel team to inform them when we find things that are out there. Actually work with law enforcement in a similar vein as well. For our existing customers, we're finding things all the time. If you think about that slide Adam had with the pinwheel and all the new content that's getting created on an hourly basis, a lot of that stuff carries risk with it. So, we're finding these sorts of things for our customers on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that leads into another question that we have. What can I do as an organization to reduce my digital risk? I know, Adam, you covered a bunch of that at the end of your presentation. Rick, do you want to start off with that one?
And kind of goes back to one of the things I was saying. I think the biggest opportunity for organizations is to get better visibility into risks. If I think about the chief information security officers that I work with now, or I work with at Forrester, very limited resources, limited staff, limited money, and you want to deploy it in the right place. So it's really important to have as clear of a risk picture as you can, so that you can deploy those limited resources in the right way. So I think getting understanding is really about having the visibility so you can make informed decisions.
Anything to add on that, Adam?
It's just, you have to in one of my 75 slides, you need to understand, your radar hitting when someone's looking at your network. And again, it's not just going to be your exposed services. I mean, many places have reduced their gateway access to the internet to just a few nodes. It has everything to do. If you are, again, a motivated adversary, especially one that's looking for intellectual property or corporate espionage or unnecessary types of information, will be throwing every tool and every capability they have against you as an organization to gain access to that. Whether it's human-enabled, by dropping, we've had one threat drop thumb drives in parking lots. People are going to pick them up, plug them in, and then you're done. You have to be aware that if someone wants what you've got, they're going to.
Great. Thanks, Adam. We had another FBI-specific question come in. Will the FBI be increasing the InfraGard activities going forward? Do you have any visibility into that?
We're, and I know it started, I guess about a decade ago, give or take, maybe a little bit longer, and it's been increasing ever since. And so again, we've actually, the FBI has created an entire section within the organization to manage our private sector relationships or public partnerships with organizations outside of the government. So yes, we will be increasing our working with private sector to again affect both goals: ours to mitigate the long-term threat, and the private sector's goals, which is to protect themselves against known and yet unknown threats.
The resources to help protect against the cyber threats are usually targeting large to enterprise businesses and are at a high cost. What would be your advice on finding trusted partners and tools that we could use to assist the small business community?
I'll take a first pass at that. I agree. It's a big challenge for organizations that aren't as resource rich. I think in those cases, looking through managed service providers, software as a service vendors that are out there that you can leverage their economies of scale and their tool sets to accomplish the specific things that you need is typically the route that I think is most appropriate there. And software as a service is a big component of that as well. Even if you look at your regular IT stack, trying to use others who are experts in those areas where you can, and then focus your limited resources on the things that are core to your business.
I just one thing for Adam, it's obviously utilizing sort of enterprise capabilities that are now and is offered as services now is a great way to to help mitigate risk. I know in many instances there are groups. So if you're in an industry, large, big enterprise players, there may be, and they're often sort of these organically created clusters, these groups of network security professionals, sort of that are experienced in that particular business. A lot of times that's practices. Finding those groups that work within those organizations that often share a lot of the best ways to protect themselves with their members.
The next question: what new risks are coming that I need to start preparing for now? Maybe Adam, do you want to take a crack at this one first?
Yeah. I mean, it's as you sort of seen. Hopefully, I was able to convey the concept of convergence when at least it comes from the TTP, the techniques, tactics, and procedures that have been very successful on the more nation-state, government-sponsored types of attacks. A lot of that's transitioning to the there is, I think Lockheed Martin put out a report, a whole kill chain philosophy of how to understand the timing and the execution of attack against your network. You're going to be seeing that a lot more even on the criminal side. So kind of familiar with those tactics help you better understand how you can implement measures to protect against some of those tactics, like whether it's hardening your, doing the typical network security type things, layered defenses and all that. Make sure those are tip top. But the human element of how an adversary may penetrate your network to either, lock your master boot record or, steal an, IP. There's going to be I think the utilization of that human element on the horizon, if it's not already here, utilizing that recon phase, social engineering phase, again, to affect access and attack.
Anything to add on that one?
It is interesting to watch the more sophisticated tools leak into the public sector. If you look at Hacking Team, and then as you look at shadow brokers and those, so I think, and we're going to see more leaks of these things as they become public. Understanding how those tools operate, what they're exploiting, is going to be pretty key, because it's that one graphic that had, I forgot the line Adam said, but it was about the skill set, and it's easier and easier. I think trying to keep track of the tools that are available and understand what they're exploiting is really key, because criminals of all maturity levels, attackers of all maturity levels, are going to leverage them. So that's going to be pretty key going forward.
Great for that additional commentary. Here's an interesting question that came in. Corporations use social media as part of their marketing tools. Does this increase their vulnerability, and what are ways to monitor this more closely? Rick?
Sure, absolutely. Social media is up there with cloud and mobility as a way to engage with customers and consumers. So there are a lot of vulnerabilities. We see people taking over spoofing profiles of individuals within an organization for nefarious purposes. Also we'll see people that are spoofing profiles for like that, where they just want to impact the brand negatively, versus when I said nefarious before, it's more like a cyber threat perspective, social engineering for phishing or something along those lines. So there's APIs for the social media platforms that are out there. You can plug into them. You get a visibility of who's representing your brand, who's representing your high-value targets. When I mentioned VIPs before for digital shadows, that is one of the areas that we look at in general, is looking at social media and the risks that are associated with it.
Thanks, Rick. Adam, do you have anything to add for that one?
Really, I mean, it's just another avenue for exploitation. So protect it like you would protect anything else. I think having your account doesn't necessarily expose you to things. I'm so unfortunate as to use password123 as your Twitter, credentials. Just be aware that it's another way, a very public way, that an adversary could affect, again, your brand, or affect, access to the information or the data that they want. It's just another way to get in.
Great. gone past the hour. We still have a couple questions. We're going to go ahead and address those, and then we'll start to wrap things up. The next question that came in, you mentioned do not pay ransomware, or do not pay back. How quickly will the FBI respond if a company has been hit? Do you want to elaborate on that, Adam, in terms of maybe the protocol?
So, I mean, generally we will, if we get a call that a company's been hit and sophisticatedly, that's been disabled, we'll see the severity and our availability. We could be out there the same day. I know within sort of the more recent attacks that affected global networks, some of them, especially from our office in Philadelphia, we had agents on site to organizations in our AOR that same day, trying to, again, gather evidence, understand the severity of the problem. So yeah, I mean, it's can't always guarantee that if you've got 15 or 20 systems that got affected, that you're going to get lights and sirens out to your shop. But we're available, whether it's to the Internet Crime Complaint Center 24/7, or just picking up the phone and getting routed to the right desk in the office. We've got people sort of standing by, ready to to listen, to hear what you have to say, and to understand the best way we can apply our resources to, again, affect that threat. Now, it might seem that it's going to feel worse for the company that got hit, but you're more than likely going to be one of hundreds, if not thousands, of other companies which are also getting hit. And so that case might not be might sit in LA. And if you're calling, from Philadelphia, we might not be the office to work it, but we're definitely going to be able to take your information, do what we can to get you the resources to mitigate this issue, but it might get routed to an office halfway across the country. But we're definitely they're there to listen and do what we can.
The last question that we have is, how are the organized crime groups that you mentioned actually laundering their money? Do you have a perspective on that, Adam?
Obviously, the advent of gray market Bitcoin exchanges, I mean, there's going to be laundering. It's going to be, getting it, exchanging it, and then, exchanging it for another currency, whether it's it's going to be the traditional, what you'd expect, the traditional routes for money laundering. It's going to be getting those funds in places you wouldn't expect to extract value from those transactions. So there's nothing I really have off the top of my head that's innovative about it, other than the ease of transferring this stuff, the advent of cryptocurrency, the ease of moving and stealing and disappearing into the night with those funds. It's just gotten easier.
One more question come in, so we'll go ahead and answer this one. With the number of breaches that have happened over the past few years, has the FBI seen evidence that criminals are selling the stolen data? Do you have any idea of the impact breaches are having on identity theft, fraud rates for individuals?
See, in some instances, a lot of times the breaches are utilized to affect additional breaches. So the more information they get, especially if there's, say, an organization, whether it's neighbor criminal, attacking healthcare information, it's going to be just more and better information to craft more and better attacks against a target. So knowing that I, as a government employee, have getting all my information from like the OPM hack, that's a lot to actually a further attack down the road. Now, some organizations, especially, you're gonna smash and grab, use it, and then immediately, like I'm sorry, credit card information or transaction information, they're going to use that obviously to fill blank credit cards, go make purchases, and be done with it. The end goal of the threat is really going to dictate, how that information is used. If it's money, it'll usually be quick. If it's further access to identify further vulnerabilities to exploit for another objective, that might take some time.
Ability that you have into the dark web.
We're actually about to release some research on this next week, but when it comes to payment card fraud, it's growing and growing, and the U.S. is still particularly susceptible to it, given which, for those in the States, how many debit cards do you go to, or ATMs do you go to, card readers rather, and it says, slide, don't use the pen. So within the U.S., the payment card fraud is still quite significant. You're also seeing attackers start to move to targeting mobile applications as well, other types of card not present fraud that are out there. So yeah, it's a big problem, and it's still growing. I think extortion captures a lot of the headlines these days, and understandably so, but fraud and identity theft in particular around tax season, leading into April and after April, lots of social engineering attacks related to taxes to try to get customers' information as well.
And thank you, Adam. You both had great presentations today. And thanks, everyone, for attending our webcast on best practices in cybersecurity. And watch your inboxes for an invite for our next event.